Given the nature of the topic, the slides are very important here. So I hope everybody is able to see the slides even from back there, because that's really going to help me, assist me in trying to explain what this is. I don't claim to be an expert in blockchain. Done a little bit of understanding of what the concept is. It's a buzzword, another buzzword like big data, but it's much beyond only the tax world, right? So blockchain is everybody's trying to do something on blockchain. What we've done is here, it's a short session, about 30 minutes, maybe even shorter than that, depending on how quickly I'm able to explain. And that doesn't mean you would understand necessarily. I'll try to get through what the concept of blockchain is in a very simplified manner. And then we'll look at some of what's happening, the use cases of blockchain in business on both sides, revenue side, as well as within the business processes. And then take it to the next part, which is possible use cases of blockchain in transfer pricing. So with that, let's just look at this slide here. I've created one small example. It's a story. So you have these two individuals. Let's see this works, hopefully. So you have Ramesh and Suresh, one asking for money from the other. Suresh takes some money from Ramesh. Ramesh nicely notes it down, if you can see that. That's a record created. He puts it down on the paper. Then what happens? The paper's gone. There was a record that was created on a piece of paper, left on the chair, and the papers disappeared. In the real world, this happens because when records are not maintained, Suresh claims, you never gave me any money. And our poor Ramesh does not have any proof. Now this is a wide problem with a lot of other people, and that's where our hero Swami comes. He thinks there is an opportunity here and comes up with a solution. The solution that he proposes is to create a notebook. Very simple. Notebook, every transaction is recorded as it happens in this notebook. And that is what creates a ledger. This is a database. The first creation of a database of as you were putting it. Now let's take a step further. What happens after this? Suresh happens to be a good friend. No, sorry, even before that. I'm jumping here. But coffee spills on this. The record is destroyed. And now we have a problem. So Swami comes up with another solution. He's our main guy. He's our solutions guy here. So he comes with another solution. And he says, why don't we create two databases? Why only one database? We'll create two databases. So I have two records which are simultaneously being maintained in parallel, right? And thus you have distributed database. Earlier you had only one, now you have two, right? But then what happens? You remember our friend Suresh, who is a crook, who took money and then not wanting to return? He happens to be a good friend of Swami. So they kind of talk about it for old time's sake, get into a deal, and Swami agrees to delete his record because of relationship. The record's gone. Everybody is very upset about it, of course. And because they are upset, they fire everybody. They fire Swami. Swami was the elected leader, but he's turned out to be a crook because he did all of this. But the problem continues. Now what do we do? And that's when people get started to think. If we keep bringing people like Swami, we are going to have more and more problems, or similar problems keep coming up again and again. That's when they think and come up with, why don't we all maintain a copy of the record? Every member who is participating in the transaction maintains a copy of the record, and that is when a decentralized distributed ledger is born. And this is blockchain. This is the start of your blockchain. Every transaction is recorded in here. When you record the transaction, the other condition that is added is majority of the participants must approve the transaction. That's the second pillar of a blockchain, which is where you have to have consensus. Right? There is a third pillar. You have decentralized distributed database, you have consensus, and the third pillar that comes in is this information is encrypted. And thus comes cryptography. This, in a nutshell, is a concept of blockchain as I have understood. Like I said, I'm not an expert on blockchain, so people who understand blockchain better, please feel free to add to that, or whatever I have, if there is anything to dispute on whatever I've said here, also please speak up right now so that this whole room does not go back thinking this is what is blockchain. Any questions so far on the blockchain? So you've seen how the story developed, what happened, you've got a blockchain. What is a blockchain? You don't have any intermediaries. That's really what happens. You've gotten rid of all intermediaries. Everybody is maintaining records, and the records are maintained in real time. You have some conditions laid down, and the big condition is that majority of the participants must approve, and therefore there has to be a consensus building that has to happen, right? And all of this information is stored in an encrypted form. I've just repeated all of that in a summarized format. That is what gives rise to a blockchain ecosystem. So these are the three pillars: decentralized, distributed data. I'm going to keep saying these terms because that is the key when you think about blockchain and its applications in real world as well. Decentralized distributed database, consensus, and cryptography. Now there are two byproducts that come out of this. We had all those transactions that were happening, right? Now take the actual cash out of it and replace that with virtual money, like Monopoly. We all play Monopoly. Like Monopoly, replace that with virtual money, and that gives you your cryptocurrency. Thus comes cryptocurrency. We talked about consensus building. Now that's not possible when you have thousands and millions of people on a particular blockchain. You cannot keep going asking for that every time to build a consensus. Do you approve? Do you approve? Do you approve? It will never happen. And therefore, you all agree, as part of a blockchain ecosystem, you all agree to a set of rules. When you agree to those set of rules, and if those set of rules are met, the transaction will happen automatically in the blockchain, or it will get executed once it is initiated. That is codified in a smart contract. So smart contract is very important aspect of a blockchain because that codifies how the blockchain algorithm works underlying there. Who gets what, when, on doing what they get it, all of that is codified in the smart contract. Right? Now let's look at some of the real life examples of what happens with this. So there are two sides of it. I mentioned this earlier. Blockchains, there are several businesses that are coming up which are revenue. So the revenue model is based on blockchain. Bitcoin in itself is a cryptocurrency, right? It's really not a business, so to speak, because it's just a cryptocurrency. But because the volume of that exchange increases, is supply and demand. And if the demand increases, the value goes up and it can be listed. This cryptocurrency can be listed on an index. Right? So Bitcoin in itself is not a business if you were to think about it that way. But there could be a business that uses blockchain to generate the currency. And when that currency is generated and then it is listed, then there is value in it. So let me give you an example here. This is a real live example. You guys can Google it. There is a company called InMusic, which is coming up. They are developing a platform, a common platform. How many of you have been using Hangama or Ghana.com, things like that? Yeah? Familiar with that? These are sites where you can go and access music, Indian music mostly, right? Or media, any entertainment as well. This platform, InMusic, says we, as users of this platform, should also get compensated. Nobody is compensating us for our time. This goes back to what my partner was saying earlier in my big data session, that when you sign up for LinkedIn, nobody pays you for that. Here we are talking about, this system talks about your contribution on the platform is of value and you should be earning money out of it. So the listeners also get paid. Now you could have two types of listeners. You could have listeners who are only there to listen and enjoy, who would pay a fee for doing that. And then you could have listeners who are contributing. How are they going to contribute? In a music life cycle, music starts with somebody has to contribute the music. The first thing is to identify whether this is authentic source. And that identification and validation itself is an activity, which people like us can do. Second thing is curating of music and identifying which one is going to be really be a big hit or not a big hit, and then invest in that. Now, how do you really identify that? Today, music companies do this. What this platform talks about doing, and by the way, this is a real business model, they've already raised money. What they talk about doing is, you and I, like common users, will vote. And because of those votes, we can get paid for those votes, depending on how popular the music becomes. Likewise, the artists who contribute the music to the platform also get paid for the same thing, for contributing to the music, and the more they rise at the top of the chart, the better they get paid for that. So you have listeners, you have artists both getting paid. Then what happens? How are you getting paid? It's not cash that is coming to you. It's a coin that's coming to you. And that's a virtual currency that's coming to you. So you are paid in form of a virtual cryptocurrency, say a Bitcoin or anything, but it won't be Bitcoin because Bitcoin is a separate currency itself. These guys can have their own currency. And that can then be listed on index. There are indexes that list these currencies, right? Now keep in mind that any cryptocurrency, when it is released, it's quite similar to Forex in many ways. The quantity is limited. And that's why the forces of demand and supply really lead to the increase of the value of that currency. So here also, whenever you have a cryptocurrency, the original quantum is fixed, and that over the life of the currency will never change. It will remain fixed at that number. So if, let's say, in our case, the coins that they are going to come out with, there are a total of 1 million coins that they will come out with, and that will remain 1 million no matter what. But per unit of that coin value will fluctuate depending on how valuable that becomes. Now, why would it become valuable? The reason it would become valuable is people like us will start contributing to good music. You'll have more good music coming out of it, and all of us are making money out of that, right? And that's why the value of that currency is going up. More and more users come on it. The other side can also very easily happen. People sitting in this room, let's say this is the only universe and our sense of music is perhaps the worst. If we assume that, then we may end up putting votes for music which is not going to be a hit. And if that happens, then this whole thing can go down as well, and therefore the value of the currency may not be there. The currency itself can be invested in. And that's the investment part of it, if you see. So there is the exchange on which you can deal in this. And then there is once you are on the exchange, you are able to then liquidate that as well. You can actually convert it into cash if you want to come out of it. So buying in as well as coming out can happen through cash, right? So this is a real business model that we are talking about. Now let's start to understand what are the different aspects that really become important in this ecosystem when we start putting our transfer pricing hat on it. If you saw this, it comes back to the same 5 components that I told you. Decentralized, distributed database. There is no central entity that's controlling anything. We are the users, we are the listeners, there is artists, both the communities coming together and doing things. There is a platform, yes, but nobody's controlling it. Because the rate at which you get something paid, a coin paid for your contribution, that algorithm is set, and that algorithm is the smart contract. I hope I haven't lost anybody so far. Questions, please do ask. So you have the distributed database, you have consensus, that's what we are talking about. Maximum votes would lead to value creation that we are talking about. All of this information is encrypted in the system, so nobody can just take it away. And by the way, this is all immutable. That's another key characteristic of blockchain, which I have not touched upon. Immutable meaning you cannot change anything. A blockchain, one transaction leads to another transaction, well, not necessarily leads to another transaction, but the second transaction, succeeding transaction, is always linked to the previous transaction. So if you are to make a change at any point, it's not possible because all of this is connected. So you cannot erase anything. Once you do a transaction, you can do another transaction. If I have done transaction with you to give you 100 rupees, to cancel that transaction, I have to do another transaction, just take back the 100 rupees. There is no way for me to cancel the transaction. Right? That's how it works in a blockchain. So if you see, you got all the 5 components here. Put the transfer pricing layer on this. 5 value drivers that we can think of. If you think somebody conceptualized this whole system, right? You had to program it because there are I don't know how many of you are aware, there are various programs that are available. IBM is a big one that has Ethereum that works, that is used to create blockchains. And it's considered one of the front runners on that one, but there are others as well. So you can use these softwares to develop, and these are programs to develop, and just like you coded, the codes have to be created for a blockchain. So somebody had to do that, right? The portal itself. The portal is not the blockchain. Portal is just a window to see what's happening. It's a dashboard kind of thing. Somebody had to develop that and keep it active. Right? User base. People like us, listeners and artists, both alike, is another value driver that we talk about. And the last one we are talking about is the cryptocurrency itself and who is owning the cryptocurrency. These are various different value drivers within this ecosystem that we have just talked about. I don't know if I said this or not, and I should make this disclaimer now again, if I've not said it earlier, is I'm not going to give you any answers on how to do transfer pricing on this. I'm only going to tell you there is a real transfer pricing problem with these things, models, and then understanding where and how you go about applying transfer pricing. If you look at these value drivers, now think about it. The person who created or came up with this idea is sitting in US, right? They hired a bunch of people in Bangalore to develop the program. But because in India you cannot legally trade or list cryptocurrency, so you went to Indonesia to list the cryptocurrency. And your user base is around the world. How do you really distribute the value coming out of this? And where are you going to tax it? This is just the beginning. And there are various business models coming up on this. This is a revenue side business model based on blockchain. One interesting thing is everybody who comes up with a blockchain based business model, they create a white paper which is in the public. So this whole white paper, in music, if you Google it, you'll find the white paper. It's a nice little read. It's a pretty nice read. And you find that white paper. The reason is that it's important or it's required. It's mandatory for you to have a white paper before you can list the coin. And therefore you have to have a white paper. So that also becomes public. What they don't make public is the algorithm based on which you are going to get the coins. That remains quite with them. And so if you look at this video, there's a nice little video on in music also. They'll say everybody gets a fair return, but they never talk about how they get to the fair return. And that's really the algorithm that we are talking about. So there are aspects to this which are very new and to be understood. You can have this business, if you think about this entire business, the entire blockchain is really more a blockchain without the currency. You can have this blockchain without the currency itself. And then you are imposing currency on it, which becomes the driver. Because without the currency, you and I are not going on that side. We're not going to waste our time trying to listen to 100 different artists and see who is good, who is not good. But there is an incentive. And that's why currency becomes an important driver here. The people who started the blockchain could also be sitting on some stockpile of that currency, which once it is listed and the value picks up, can actually liquidate that and make money. So there are various different angles to it, and this is what it depicts, that all these value drivers could be lying around the world in different places, different jurisdictions. How do you go about doing transfer pricing on something like this? The other side of it is use of blockchain within processes, in-house processes, work that we do, with the various different processes around the supply chain of a business where blockchain can be used. Let me give you some examples here. And this is where the cryptocurrency doesn't come in. These are more private blockchains. Need not be public blockchain. I'll not get into the concept of public and private blockchains. Think about it. Finance is a classic example. There's a lot of resistance today from the finance community that we don't want to recognize cryptocurrency. And why is that? Think about it. The number of good reasons for it as well, because in that system, you can't find out who really got it and where it came from. So that's a big concern why RBI does not want cryptocurrency to be legal here. But why the financial institutions don't want it is because their role will be gone. Our Mr. Swami disappeared, right? That's exactly what would happen to the banks if you put a blockchain around these financial products. Insurance is another one. There's several. I'm not going to go into each of these, but a lot of these ones allow you to do, one, document all the transactions, but at the same time see the flow. So you are able to, one example which is not on here is Diamond. Diamond is quite interesting because it comes out in one country. It's very difficult to get it out of that country in the right shape and right time, because a lot of times it's in hostile environment as well. You're talking about countries where you don't have all the systems and securities in place. From there, the diamond goes to another country for getting cured, polishing, cutting. It happens in another country. And then from there, it goes to the markets for selling. At what point the diamond is real or it changes from real to unreal? You put all of this on a blockchain, and which is happening as we speak. The certificate of authenticity is verified at every level, and that's embedded in the smart contract itself, and it would not move if those parameters are not met at every stage. And so you have, at the last person who is receiving the diamond, if you and I are going in the shop and buying it, we have that confidence that where this has come from, and you can trace it back and its authenticity right to its origin. Same thing in drugs. The counterfeit drugs is a major issue today. Major issue. And that is being tackled by use of blockchain. You are able to validate and verify the authenticity of these drugs right from beginning to the end, on when they entered the process, where they entered the process, the supply chain and all of it. But that takes care of the supply chain side of it. We haven't seen, at least so far, I haven't been able to identify any specific transfer pricing issues coming out of it. In fact, if anything, it helps because you get more documentation out of it. So on these uses, we have not seen much of the transfer pricing. I can see a lot of transfer pricing issues coming out of when we see the InMusic example that we just went through, when you have blockchain-based revenue models. The last piece that I have is use of blockchain in transfer pricing. Now, what I mean by transfer pricing, so one is we have talked about use of where blockchain is being used in business models and the transfer pricing issues. Now we're talking about in managing transfer pricing function. Can we use blockchain? There are 6 examples that are listed in here and which are being actively worked on as we speak across the world. Various people are working on it, and this will become reality. The first one is Intra-Group Services. Intra-Group Services, end of the day, is what? You collect all the cost into a central pool, and then you allocate it out. And there is a logic that is built into it, right? Now think about putting all of that on a blockchain and build that logic into a smart contract. The transactions will simply flow. I'm overly simplifying it, but that's exactly how it would work. This is one of the biggest areas that people are looking at on intra-group services globally, to implement a blockchain which allows, and then you have transparency of the information to see where the money came from, where the charge came from, and who is paid, at what time you have paid, all of that. The other area is cash pooling. Cash pooling is not that prevalent in India, but overseas, cash pooling is very common. You could have a blockchain set up for cash pooling where all the nodes are every individual that is connected, or every every aspect that interacts with the blockchain becomes a node. You could have various entities from where the cash is getting generated and it's needed in the other place, and you built a smart contract with the logic of if somebody needs it, if it is from this country to this country based on this kind of risk profile, then this is the rate. All of that is documented in your smart contract. It works like a charm then, and you don't need to manage it, and you don't need a bank to manage it. Today, cash pooling is mostly actively managed by bank, and they make good money out of it. I'm not here to put banks out of business. That's not my intention, but I can see that as a very, very easy industry where a lot of things can be used, replaced with blockchain. Receivables management, again the same logic. Now you get it by now how it works, right? Receivables, intra-group receivables is a big, big exercise. Everybody tries to, but there's no risk between intra-group. It's one pocket to another pocket. Everybody needs cash. Yes, I understand that. But end of the day, you have to pay. And usually you will have global policies. You have to pay either in 30 days or in 60 days or in 90 days. Whatever is the policy is your smart contract. Once the transaction is done, you are on the blockchain, the cash will flow. And the receivables will be settled in a timely manner. Again, something that you can see very transparently in this. Another one is price setting itself. So if most of us, let's say, I'll simplify this by using a cost plus example. Cost plus example, across the world, a multinational has, let's say, 10 cost plus centers, delivery centers across the world. And all of them work on a cost plus certain percentages. That's your algorithm. That's your smart contract. And that's put in place. I know I'm simplifying some of these things, but that's really how the technology, and you and I don't need to figure out how to code this, right? There are people who do that. But this is what is being used for. And algorithms are being developed, blockchains are being developed to follow this so that you don't have to balance out these things, you don't need to keep reconciling these things and worry about issuing all the invoices, every time changing things. Fix it in here, set it up, and it works. Comparable data. This is an interesting one. This is not about third-party, outside external comparables, but transfer pricing uses a lot of internal comparables. Especially cup data is so difficult to find, but if you have your transactions put on blockchain, there is a good possibility for you to map up those transactions and get that data. And one good thing about blockchain is, in addition to many others, it's not sample data. It's 100% of the transaction and universe that's happening on this. So at any point you want to query anything out of it, you get the data as whole. You get the data as 100%. It's not just piecemeal to say, let me just sample check 2 transactions on this month or 2 transactions that month. You can take a dump of the whole thing because everything is going through that. And nothing can be changed. If somebody has changed it, it will be recorded in the blockchain, right? The last one, this is very interesting. APA, virtual APA monitoring or implementation. Let's say you have a bilateral APA in place. Both the countries have to do annual compliance review. You can build a blockchain which gives the tax authorities window into it and see that this is how the transaction is happening, and they are able to test it real time, and you don't even have to think about it. This is something that is being also worked on as we speak. So there are multiple use cases of blockchain in transfer pricing, as you can see, and these are solutions that will become more and more prominent, especially in today's world when we're talking about CBCR, master file, everything at a central level. Things are already moving in that direction. Now, if your transfer pricing is on this, and tomorrow you have to prepare your master file and CBCR, how easy it is for you to pull out the information, right? It all sounds very good, but we know that one rule cannot be followed across the world, and therefore you will run into challenges. Even if you have global policies often are not followed as is in India. You will have an Indianized version of the global policy. So those things will not stay for too long in any case, for the only reason, or it will have to be adapted into the master file itself or your global policy itself, for the simple reason that now with master file and CBCR, countries are going to look at that information, and you will need an explanation to it. Earlier, you could have actually get away with having different policies, different places, because there was information asymmetry. At one point, you had to give documentation only of one country to that country, and they didn't have visibility on the other side, which is changing, as we all know. You all would have gone through filing of master file, and a lot of you would have given declarations on CBCR earlier this year. So that's pretty much it on blockchain and transfer pricing. I'm happy to take any questions. I hope I haven't confused you any more than you are on this topic. I tried to do what I could on explaining what blockchain is, but I think it's very exciting. It's very exciting on the use cases that we are talking about, because it would make life a lot easier for people sitting in this room on doing and dealing with this on a day-to-day basis. At the same time, we are getting these newer business models, and some of you will start seeing it. You don't need a new business or a new enterprise to start. In your own companies, there will be examples where they are starting to use blockchain. So keep an eye out for that and see where are the transfer pricing issues that will start cropping up because of that. Thank you very much, everyone. Yes, sir. Sorry?
What is the weakness of this blockchain?
Good question. The weakness of blockchain is it's very, very data intensive. So think about it. Currently, we all go to bank, there is only one record that is maintained. Now we are talking about everybody maintaining record of every transaction. That volume is humongous. It is predicted, and I don't have the exact statistic, it is predicted that in a couple of years, the amount of energy, amount of power consumed for processing Bitcoin is going to be equal to a country consuming power. So the scalability is still a question mark. And that is the biggest weakness that you can think of. But other than that, there is a lot of good sides of it. All right.
We can take one more question on blockchain and. Bitcoin has their own data center to manage all this power.
I'm sorry?
Bitcoin has their own data center to manage all these transactions.
No, sir. So Bitcoin is not really a company in itself, right? Bitcoin created the concept and floated it. Bitcoin is managed by all of us. It uses the power of individual computers, whoever is mining across the world, and their powers are being used for mining of. In fact, in China, they banned Bitcoin mining because of the power consumption. There were Bitcoin mining farms that were set up in China. Sure. In fact, there is very good point. Thanks for raising it. And there's a huge use case there. Another one that I'm aware of is Andhra has this chit fund, and chit fund industry has lot of back and forth that you have to do with the government. There's this guy who is working on, and this is in connection, in joint collaboration with Andhra government. They're creating a blockchain, and the whole chit fund will be on the blockchain where the government approves through that. And now you don't have to, because in chit fund, for every little change, you have to run to the government, to the office, get it stamped, come back, and it happens like, I don't know how many times during the day itself. And then there is chit fund, there is sub-chit fund, there is sub-chit fund, and all of those grouping that happens. So each of those becomes nodes, sub-nodes, and that kind of stuff. And blockchain is a big solution on that one as well.
Anyone who's applied blockchain in India, I mean ICICI Bank claims that they're the first bank, but anyone in the transfer pricing world or the tax world who's looking at applying, or that
We should talk after a few months.
But you expect that soon in India?
I do expect this to happen sooner than later. I expect clients to or companies to start using blockchain for business uses, right? And come up with business models. As we speak, I was on call yesterday, and we have a client where we are helping them design what you saw on all those in music parameters. The same parameters remain in any blockchain setup, which is a revenue business model. And we are addressing on how to divide the value across different countries where these value drivers are in different countries. So that's happening as we speak.
Big hand for Kunj, please.
Thank you, guys.
I think it's fascinating, and this has been one of the running themes through the day. We talked about big data, data analytics in the morning, followed by digital economy challenges, taxation challenges, and at last year's conference we called the digital. We like to come up with these funky names for some of these sessions, like Ame has done with Road to TP Nirvana. Last year with the digital economy panel at the conclave, we said it's like solving the Rubik's Cube, digital economy, and we are still trying to solve it. Similarly, blockchain, it's a technology which 12 months back, everyone was still talking about as in the future, and then Bitcoin took a nosedive. And yet we are here, everyone is saying that this is the next wave of disruption. And continuing on this theme, tomorrow, we are going to have a session by Girish Chaturvedi, who's the Chief Business Officer Digital at Netcore. It's one of the largest digital marketing companies in the country. And he's going to be talking on the future of the digital world. And it would be, at least Kunja's talk tried to connect blockchain to transfer pricing, though it is in the near future. Tomorrow we will take a deep dive into the future itself, on artificial intelligence, on robotics, where is that headed, and especially what is in it for us as corporates, us as consumers. I think that's an angle that Girish refers to as digital Darwinism. Very interesting session tomorrow. I'm sure you all wouldn't want to miss it. Should we take a tea break before we start the next session, or how should we go about it? Yes or no? How many say yes? Raise their hands. The eyes make it. So we'll take a 10-minute tea break, 10 minutes, and we come back because we have a cocktail at 5:45. So only